On today's show, we're going to review the Tigers losing the series to the Brewers 2-1. We got a Dan Hurley update this morning that he turned down the Lakers job. So how does that impact the coaching search of the Pistons? And MSU football landed 2 more recruits this weekend for their 2025 class. We break all that down on today's show.
There's the snap. Blitz comes. Mayfield back. Loads. Throws. Picked up by the Lions. Intercepted by the Lions. Intercepted by the Lions. Derek Barnes. Derek Barnes. Derek Barnes. Reggie Miller. And it's blocked again. What a block.
Lead pass in for Larkin. In space for Raymond. And he scores! Lucas Raymond!
Welcome back to another episode of Detroit Sports Talk. Today is Monday, June 10th, and I am your host, Bobby Buckets. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to talk some Detroit sports today. Be sure to like the show, subscribe to the channel, comment your thoughts on today's topics below, and be sure to follow me on Twitter at Bobby Buckets. Updates across the sports world. Honestly, don't have them because I had to go to the vet this morning, doing some work today. We're at the end of the work day. I haven't even made time to make a script. We're going live. I have no idea the specifics on what I'm going to talk about. We're going to dive into them. I've got some things pulled up that I'm going to look at as we go through it. Frankly, the only update in the sports world, I guess we could say, is that Boston is up 2-0 on Dallas in the NBA Finals, and I did not pay attention to the NHL Finals to see who won that game. So, not sure there. But, Tigers, Brewers, let's go. All right, first topic, let's break down the 3 games against the Milwaukee Brewers this weekend. If you watched the first game, I am so sorry. Milwaukee won 10-0, and the Tigers generated 2 hits while the Brewers generated 16. So let's take a look at who threw for Detroit. That was Reese Olson. He had a terrible outing as he threw 4 innings, gave up 12 hits and 8 runs. He did strike out 6 guys in those 4 innings, but essentially he either struck them out or they got a hit, and majority of the time they got a hit. So unfortunately, Reese Olson's perfect ERA that was better than Tarek Skubal no longer, as he is up to a 3.43 ERA, but Reese Olson moves to 1-7 after that first game against the Brewers, where again, surprise, surprise, Reese Olson pitches, and he gets no offense. So Matt Vierling was the only one to get a hit, and then Zach McKinstry at one point pinch hit for Riley Green, and McKinstry got the hit. Funny enough, it looks like Zach McKinstry did pitch again, and he did. He got an inning in, and I think that's like 3 times in the last 10 games that Zach McKinstry has pitched. So I will say the 2 times that the Tigers got hits, they did end up in scoring position, so they were 0 for 2 with men in scoring position, while the Brewers were a whopping 6 for 13. So we got 2 guys that were at least on to second. Brewers got 13. So a 10-0 loss on Friday. Didn't miss much there except for Reese Olson getting no run support, which, surprise, surprise. If you watched the Saturday game, that was a much more competitive game where the Brewers won 5-4. Casey Mize started this game for Detroit. He threw almost 6 innings. He threw 5 1/3. He gave up 8 hits, still a lot of hits, 5 runs. Only 3 of them were earned, but 2 walks and no strikeouts. So almost went 6 innings to only get 1 strikeout is not great there. But Casey Mize gets the loss in this one. He moves to 1-4 with a 4.73 ERA. I know that he's coming off Tommy John surgery, and he just hasn't been the guy that you hoped he would be prior to, taking him with such a high draft pick. But you got relief from Shelby Miller, Jason Foley, and Andrew Chaffin. Each threw about an inning to clean up the rest of the game after they pulled Casey. From an offensive standpoint, 5 hits. So, again, not great, but Tigers were 3 of 9 with runners in scoring position as opposed to being 0 for 2 the previous game. And it's tough to see, but Brewers were 3 for 12. So they had more opportunities, converted the same amount of times as the Tigers, but really not a whole lot of luck coming from the offensive side. Mark Cano 1 of 4, Gio Urshela 1 of 4, Javi Baez 1 of 4, and Carson Kelly was 2 of 4. Those were your 5 hits. Nobody else got one. So a 5-4 loss on Saturday. Moving on to Sunday. Hopefully Sunday was the only game that you paid attention to, and in that case, you would have thought this was the best weekend ever, but they only got 1 win out of the 3 games, and they destroyed the Brewers on Sunday 10-2. They got 8 runs in the 5th inning, which is crazy. They got 2 in the first, and by they, I mean the Tigers. The Tigers scored 2 in the first. They scored 8 in the 5th. And then the Brewers didn't score their 2 runs until 1 in the top of the 7th and 1 in the top of the 9th. I got one question for you guys. If the Tigers won 10-2, who pitched? That's right, Tarek Skubal. Scoobs moves to 8-1. He is potentially the best pitcher in baseball right now, if not the best pitcher in the American League. He went almost 7 innings with 5 hits, 10 strikeouts. The dude was dealing, and at one point threw a 101.7 mile per hour pitch. So almost hit 102 with a fastball. The dude is dealing. He has a 1.92 ERA. He is a Cy Young candidate, if not a Cy Young favorite, and just straight dealt. 6.2 innings pitched, 5 hits, 1 run, and 10 strikeouts. The dude is a stud. It's hard to say what the Tigers' future looks like, from a lineup standpoint. Is Torque going to come around? Is Riley Green your guy? You've got some good prospects up and coming. So I'm not entirely sure what this Tigers roster looks like, but as long as Chris Ilitch is not cheap and decides to pay Tarek Skubal, which he should, considering you're already under contract through 2026, just pay the guy, man. You're in a no cap space. Just pay that man and get him his money. You're in a no cap sport, is what I meant. And from an offensive standpoint, the Tigers decide to wake up because of Skubal's pitching. They got to provide run support for whatever reason. They don't do it for Reese, but everybody that hit for the Tigers had a hit except for Mark Canha. So every player had a hit. 2 hits for Perez, 1 for Vierling, 2 for Green, 2 for Urshela, 1 for Malloy, 1 for McKinstry, 1 for Ibanez, and 2 for Jake Rogers. Jake Rogers hit another home run, his 5th of the year. And Tigers were 5 for 11 with runners in scoring position. So not only did they have plenty of opportunities, they also converted that on 5 times. Brewers only ended up with 7 hits. They got 6 of those off of Skubal. And really they had no homers. They struggled, man. They were 1 for 7 with runners in scoring position. So a much better game from Detroit on Sunday. So that is it for the overview of the Tigers. They now sit at 32-33, continue tottering. Teeter-totter, is that what it is? They continue to teeter-totter on 500 ball. So 32-33. They at one point, I think we're at 31-30, and they were above 500. So hopefully can continue that play. They do not play today on Monday, June 10th, but They start their series. Excuse me. They start their series. Let's see. Tomorrow they start a brand new series against the Washington Nationals. So they got 3 games upcoming for the Washington Nationals, Tuesday through Thursday, and then they travel to Houston this weekend. So 6 games in the next 6 games in the next 6 days. We'll see how they do here on Detroit Sports Talk. Next, I want to discuss the Dan Hurley news that came out this morning from Woj. Kind of some shocking news in more way than one. So we got a report from Woj that the Lakers offered Dan Hurley 6 years and $70 million to be the Lakers head coach. And Dan Hurley turned it down to return to UConn to try to three-peat, win another national title with UConn. It would be the 3rd in a row. So 2 things to me are quite shocking. Number one, I'm shocked that he turned it down. Everything that we heard from Woj made it seem like they were, had convinced Hurley. They gave this big spiel. They did everything that they could to get him. He visited LA on Friday, told them that he'd make his decision on Monday, and boom, we get that decision that he is not returning to UConn. Now, that's kind of shocking, but it's less shocking when we discuss the number that was offered. So first off, I want to go back to Tom Gore's offering Monty Williams at the time the highest contract ever for an NBA coach until Popovich received his extension. So let's go back and remember Monty Williams accepted a 6-year, $78.5 million deal. The Lakers offered Dan Hurley the same length, 6 years, but $8.5 million less than Monty Williams. It was 6 for 70 compared to 6 for 78.5. Now, I just can't believe that the Lakers didn't offer 8 years, $100 million. Make him a 9-digit offer that he cannot turn down, and Dan Hurley most likely would have been your basketball coach. Instead, you tried to make him like the 6th or 7th highest paid coach in the league. And it's just like, Dan Hurley's not leaving for that kind of money. He wants to be a top 5 guy, a top 3 guy. I would have gave him 8 for 100 if you were truly serious. So frankly, after all of this, to me, it makes it seem like Dan Hurley was using this as leverage against UConn to increase his offer. He signed a 6-year, $32 million deal just last year with UConn. So he's making a little over $5 million per year. LA basically doubled it, but relative to other coaches in the league, it was nowhere close. And frankly, Monty Williams, the coach of a 14-win team, was making more money than him. So I don't blame him for turning it down. All right, that's more NBA league talk, but more specifically for the Pistons, I think the only way that this affects the Pistons is if you are like me, who JJ Redick is the number 1 option for me that I want on our team. And so if it's true, way back when Shams reported that JJ was the front runner prior to the Dan Hurley news coming out, if it is true that JJ Redick is the front runner and will be the head coach of the Lakers, that's really the only way this impacts the Pistons. Otherwise, we had touched before that there are still plenty good assistants out there. James Borrego is one that we talked about. Seems like things are heating up there with Cleveland, so that's interesting. But in terms of other first-timers, David Adelman from Denver, assistant coach at Denver, still available. Chris Quinn, assistant at Miami, young up-and-comer, still available. Micah Nori, assistant to Minnesota, who was also assistant when Dwayne Casey was in Detroit, still available. Sam Cassell in LA, still available. There are still plenty of options available. I think the only way that this affects the Pistons is if that Duke Trajan and JJ Redick connection is real, and if JJ would have been a candidate to interview with the Pistons, that's the only way this affects this. If the rumors are true that JJ ends up in LA as the front runner. But frankly, with everything, we're going back and forth with this LA job. Frankly, Monty Williams still has a job. So we need Monty to get fired first for us to even hire a new guy. So we'll continue to see what happens or what develops throughout this next week. Do we hear news? I expected to hear news last week, but we didn't. So maybe this week we'll hear some news. But other than that, I would say this doesn't change much for the Pistons. And I think you just be patient, and Trajan will get his guy if he decides to move on from Monty, which hopefully he does. But what are your thoughts on the Dan Hurley news, the contract that was offered, considering it was less than Monty? I don't blame Hurley at all for turning it down, but what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments or over on Twitter. All right, last, I want to discuss Michigan State football in their 2025 recruiting class because they just landed 2 more commits. Jonathan Smith has 7 commits already for 2025. Frankly, I have not compared that to other Big Ten teams or really any other team. I haven't looked. But for a brand new coach starting a couple months ago, I just kind of find it fascinating that they're already making moves across, and frankly, it is across the country, of landing recruits. So they've got a couple guys coming from Michigan. There are 3 guys out of their 7 that are from Michigan, 1 from Ohio, 1 from Wisconsin. So they're all sticking in that Midwest area, but 2 of them are from California. One of them is Leo Hannon, who is going to be the star of this group so far because he is your quarterback. He's currently the highest rated prospect overall on 24/7, and very well Leo could turn into a 4-star by the end of his senior season. But starting this off with a commit from Leo Hannon, your QB, just kind of be that head of the class, and maybe go out and even, incentivize some other people to want to commit, to want to play with a quarterback like Leo. But they've got 7 guys so far, all 3 stars. And 2 of them are new as of this weekend. So the first one that I want to touch on is Braylon Collier. He is a wide receiver, a 6'1" wide receiver from Sandusky, Ohio. If that sounds familiar, that's because Cedar Point is there. So I hope he got to go to Cedar Point a ton because he probably did. Looking at Braylon's, who else was offered to him? A lot of smaller schools in Akron, Ball State, Bowling Green. But as we go down this list, I see Iowa, Iowa State, and Western. So we got offered by a couple Big Ten schools, ultimately choosing Michigan State as the 6'1" wide receiver. Will join us from Ohio next year. The other commit actually came today, but I'm going to include it as a weekend commit, and that is Drew Nichols. So this is the other commit along with Leo Hannon that is from California. Not sure how close that they are, but he's an interior offensive lineman is what 24 Sports has him at. So maybe he is a guard or a center, but at 6'5", 270, he is a big boy. So looking at his interests, he had offers from Arizona, Arizona State, Arkansas, Boise State, California, University of Miami, Minnesota, SMU, and UCLA. He actually was scheduled to go on an official visit to UCLA next weekend, decides to cancel that because he says, Coach Smith, I'm coming to you guys, and he committed to Michigan State this morning. So a big-time deal, big-time weekend for Michigan State football, continuing to add to that 2025 class. Ultimately, you just have to give it up to Jonathan Smith with the way that they have worked in the portal this summer to just get depth across the team. They're going out and they're getting young talent in that 2025 class with 7 commits already. frankly, I really don't have any expectations going into this Michigan State football season, and I'm just excited to watch. I'm excited to kind of grow with the team, learn who's on the team as the season goes on, and then wherever our weaknesses are, we expect Smith to address them. But man, if we could play in a bowl game year one of Jonathan Smith, that would be big time. So let me know what you guys think about Michigan State's recruiting class in 2025 so far, your thoughts on Jonathan Smith and their staff as they have continued to try to bring talent into East Lansing. Let me know in the comments below or over on Twitter. And that is it for this episode of Detroit Sports Talk. Thanks again for taking the time to talk some Detroit sports today. As a reminder, be sure to like the show, subscribe to the channel, comment your thoughts below on today's topics, and be sure to follow me on Twitter at Bobby Buckets. Thanks again for taking the time to talk some Detroit sports, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.